Welcome to the MIM Podcast. I'm Adam Norman, founder and CEO at MIM, where we're on a mission to create the best major incident managers in the world. At MIM, our clients range from the largest, most well-known companies through to new, innovative companies across almost every industry from more than 72 different countries. You're going to hear about the best practices, strategies and tactics, how companies deliver major incident management excellence, some of the challenges they face, and different views on major incident management from around the world, as well as how major incident management is constantly evolving. On this podcast, we go deeper, interviewing professionals from the community. Our hope is that you will leave this podcast with some new ideas and a greater passion for major incident performance. In this episode, I'm joined by Dan Walker, IT Service Operations Manager at Cityfibre. We discuss Dan's journey leading the development and implementation of a new major incident function and his experience through the process. We also talk about Cityfibre's journey to become the UK's third digital infrastructure platform alongside Virgin and BT, with an investment of £4 billion and the major incident function's role within this. Enjoy the show. Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Very well, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show. Really exciting to speak with you. Obviously, I know the journey you've been on at Cityfibre pretty well. So a very, very interesting conversation and person to have on the show. So obviously, I know you very well and know Cityfibre well. But for people who don't, do you want to introduce the company and yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I've been working for Cityfibre now for just over 12 months. So I am one of the service operation managers, which means I'm responsible for the incident, problem and major incident processes. Sort of previous to that, I've spent the last 15 years now working in various IT positions, IT support, IT management, service desk management, major incident roles, all that kind of stuff, really. And which has led me nicely to this role, really. Cityfibre have quite a clear goal, which is to become the UK's third digital infrastructure platform, which is what they're trying to build at the minute. Well, which is what they are building. We're investing £4 billion into that, and our goal is by 2025 to reach around 8 million premises. We'll be live in more than 100 UK towns and cities, which is around 30% of the UK. So we're building constantly at the minute, very fast. We are actually ahead of our forecasts, so it's all going really, really well. There's lots of people out there doing some really, really good work. Things are going really, really well at the minute.
So really interesting, really interesting. So when you say the UK's third infrastructure provider, to a layperson, what does that actually mean? So who are the other providers? What does that actually mean? What's it going to do for people?
So we're going up against Virgin and BT Openreach. So everybody knows BT. They've pretty much got not a monopoly on everywhere, but it's either BT or Virgin, basically. So we're going to build our own fibre infrastructure, which will put us alongside, if not in a better position than those. It's all brand new. It's all extremely reliable. So it'll be super fast. So I think having those big guys as our targets are pretty big targets, but I'm pretty confident that they're concerned about us, which is exactly where we want to be. And it's down to people like us here who are looking to actually shake the market up, We're helping the government achieve their goals in terms of a full fibre country because we are, as a country, if you compare us to the rest of the world in terms of fibre, we're somewhere near the bottom. So we're playing our part in actually bringing us back up to the actual top of that.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, very interesting. So yeah, obviously we work with you guys. You're a client of ours, but obviously just because of what we do, we're pretty impartial to the competitive aspect. But obviously, from a consumer and a business person's point of view, for me, more competition in the free market around something which has for quite a long time not had much diversity is really quite an interesting proposition. And obviously, free markets and proper capitalism is all about that. It's about giving the consumer and the business people the best possible options through competition. So really exciting, and also companies ultimately end up providing much better services as a result of competition. They sharpen themselves on one another. So really interesting and really quite an exciting thing. But yeah, tell me before we get into the major incident aspects. Tell me a bit more about the UK being near the bottom in terms of fibre infrastructure. I'm interested in that. Are we really that bad?
I think so. I think last time I saw the leaderboard, almost we as a country in terms of where our fibre is, we're not far off the bottom, and I think either China or Japan are at the top. But we've got a long way to go in terms of catching up. So I think now we're pushing hard. That's pushing Virgin and BT hard. So it's definitely going to hopefully push us up a little bit more, a lot quicker. So we're definitely driving the competition now. In terms of reliability, in terms of pricing, I think we're playing our part in helping the country, build much better fibre for everybody involved. Which will help businesses, it will help homes, it will help hospitals. We're going to be speeding up the whole 5G rollout. We're heavily involved in that. So we're really playing our part to move the UK where it needs to be in terms of its actual technology and what we're going to be capable of.
I mean, that's really cool. That's quite an exciting thing. I can see, obviously, again, knowing you in the team, that I can see why it's such an exciting mission to get behind, and see why the team's so engaged. I'm not massively surprised. I don't know Japan as well, but China I know reasonably well. I'm not surprised they would be near the leaderboard. I think people who don't know China particularly well, don't know the culture particularly well, have some really interesting outdated assumptions. But the truth of it is that they're already pretty much onto digital currency. They're not really using paper money anymore. They've got staffless stores. I mean, they're really doing some phenomenal things. And if you actually look into it, it's really quite exciting. It feels a lot of the time like a glimpse into the future, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, it's a shame. It's interesting because we think of ourselves in the UK as a very entrepreneurial country, which I think in some ways we are. We've had a lot of freedom, and there's been a culture of championing, albeit a bit more watered down than perhaps America, but championing the individual and giving that individualism, which kind of gives people permission to go off and create things, whether it's commerce, whether it's exploring ideas. And obviously we have a pretty good startup scene, particularly in the tech world. We have a lot of finance that flows particularly into the city. So it's really interesting to hear that we're so far behind there. I mean, I can imagine that's fairly accurate considering both as a business in our locations and a consumer, what I pay for with whoever it is and the speeds that we actually get when you run them. So yeah, it's not hard to imagine, but surprising.
Once we've got the whole 5G rolled out, I think you'll see probably quite a big spike in terms of lots of things that without the 5G that we're just not able to do in terms of maybe autonomous stuff. Autonomous driving will really spike up, and I think you'll see a lot more new tech startups around that sort of stuff because you'll have the technology there to be able to use the 5G and those really fast speeds, that is needed for anything like that.
That's really interesting. So, driving, you look at people like Elon Musk and what they're doing for that, and it's very exciting. I mean, I'm naturally quite an optimistic person. So I look at those things and think, they'll be here in 5 years, we'll be fine. Obviously, the reality is there's regulations, etc. But yeah, I mean, I very much buy into that future of a safer future, better future. So you must have some good visibility then of some of the other things that will utilise 5G, because again, for essentially lay people out there, I think they hear 5G and they hear much faster, but it's hard to understand what that might mean in terms of individuals and as consumers. So apart from AI and driving, is there anything specific that you've seen that's coming down that gets you quite excited?
Nothing that I've really seen specifically, but the fact that there are so many different businesses that can really take benefit from this, and not just businesses as well, but hospitals, schools, GP surgeries, all of this kind of stuff will be helping them moving forward. Especially now, if you think about if we had 5G enabled now, with everybody having to do homeschooling, I think the technology that would be available to us would be a lot better. I think you'd find it a lot easier to interact. You'd almost have no limitations in terms of what you can achieve over your network, really. So I think if that was available now, it would probably look a little bit different, and it may have already been the normal, but instead we've been forced into that position now, without that infrastructure and without the 5G available. So it's definitely moving forward quite quickly. So I think it's not just going to be homes and businesses that will benefit from it. It's going to be everyone, really.
Yeah, really interesting. We work with all kinds of companies, but I immediately think of I've got young nephews as well who love their games, computer games. I think for them this is going to be incredible. I'm a movie fan, so I enjoy films, but again, the car side of things, although I know you're a car fan too, I must admit I do like the old school, loud, noisy engines, and there's something about the soul of those. But you do then look at companies like Tesla and what they're doing and just how incredible they're making some of these cars. And when you then come to the point to think, well, actually, I normally, outside of COVID, I travel a lot for work. The idea of having a car that will essentially do like 4 or 5 hour journey from me, or when I get off a plane and land, I can get in the car and it will drive me. It's pretty exciting. And so, yeah, very, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, it's funny. There's lots of memes all over the internet, isn't there, about like Zoom calls or whatever service you use. And I think most of them are based around connectivity, like the jokes around whether it's lag in terms of hearing somebody speak and interrupting, whether it's in terms of audio connection issues or video connection issues. And the world's definitely moving towards more the creators. And so you think about people who actually want to create things, particularly digital products. It's pretty exciting. But so very, very cool that you guys are a big part of that and helping bring the UK up the league table. So let's talk a bit about major incident management. So I've got some questions that I'd really like to ask you because I think the viewers will find it very interesting. But if I or we perhaps set the scene first, because you guys approached us, me and the team at MIM last year, and we started talking about essentially you want to build a major incident function. So dedicated function with what you're doing, you understand, obviously as a company, that service is incredibly important, whether that's to consumers in their homes using your fibre infrastructure or whether that is businesses utilising it. Particularly, I know you're saying about phone networks, you guys being an absolutely vital component to a lot of the potentially major phone network providers. And so they naturally themselves have very good major incident functions. They're pretty good examples. Banking's pretty good. Telco's normally fairly good. So I know you guys really understood that as you're scaling and growing at a really impressive rate, that major incident management was going to be something you need to get right. So obviously you came to us, we started talking, and you and I did a lot of work personally together as well as with the team, which was really enjoyable, actually, very rewarding, again, particularly with what you guys are doing. But can you perhaps just talk us through a bit what that journey looked like at a high level? So what you were doing when you were doing it?
Yeah, the journey started not long after I started here, to be honest, and it became quite clear to me that Cityfibre acquired a company called Internet in 2017, and I actually joined Internet last year, and I joined at the time where they were just about to start rebranding and merging everything officially, and it became quite apparent to me that the major incident processes for Internet and the one for Cityfibre weren't really where they needed to be in terms of where we were going as a business, and they both suited sort of the individual companies. So it was quite clear that given the level of upscaling we're going to be doing over the next few years, our major incident process needed to be able to deal with that and be scalable as and when we needed it to be. So we started on the journey to basically rewrite the process from scratch. I've been aware of the work you guys have been doing for a number of years now, and it was a no-brainer for me to reach out to you guys and get your help. I'm certainly aware that I don't have all the answers, and it made sense to get some help from you guys because of your experience and your exposure to all the different industries and stuff. That it was certainly definitely going to be a partnership to help us get us to where we needed to be. So we've been working together, obviously, to sort of piece this process together, but not just the process. Also, I've been working internally with some internal stakeholders to help us decide also what that process will look like, what the kind of people that we want within the team, and what kind of skills do we want them to have, how the rotas are going to work in terms of out of hours, during hours, because that wasn't really where it needed to be. And for me, I wanted to put a process in place that was as simple as possible. It was scalable, and it meant as the major incident manager, my life was going to be as easy as possible in terms of having everything in one place, having making sure I could access any documentation easily, making sure that if I needed to escalate to somebody, I know who that was, and I was confident that they were going to answer the phone, for example. We've all been there at 3:00 in the morning, scrambling around, trying to find contact sheets or out of hours rotas or not knowing who you're going to ring, who's going to answer, what kind of mood they're going to be in, and how much help you're going to get. So I wanted to put something in place that sort of gets rid of all of that, from the get-go, and all I need to focus on is restoring the service as quickly as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a really, really interesting journey, and obviously, really appreciate the kind words about us. It's just by virtue of what we do, and how quickly it's grown. We've just got massive exposure. So, of course, no one gets to see as many functions as we do, and the nuances. But you guys, I think one of the nice things is, if you don't mind talking about it, is Cityfibre's got a really nice culture. So I personally visited you guys when we first started talking about this. I met with yourself and some of the leadership team, and we talked a lot. But it was very obvious from the moment you walk in, particularly at Telford, that there's something quite special about the culture you've built. Everyone seems really engaged. Everyone seems very bought in to this mission that you're on. And even, I mean, the interesting thing is, so I walked in and you had a load of Lego, really complex Lego in the middle of the office that people have been building, which I thought was great. And it's interesting because you visit some places and they go in for all the ping pong tables and all the rest of it. And there is a real thing about it. But it really struck me that was actually something that you all do together, more so than just an outlet, an escape from work amidst the workday, which I think sometimes things like ping pong can feel very much like that. And I really like that because you walk in. I think you had a Millennium Falcon, didn't you? Did you have a Millennium Falcon and a London Bridge as well?
Yeah, we've got the Taj Mahal, the Harry Potter Castle, Hogwarts. I think I'm not a Harry Potter fan, so I don't know, but yeah, I think there's a few things there, that for me when I first came in, it was quite unusual to see that, and if you think about the Millennium Falcon's got thousands and thousands of pieces.
I was just going to ask you how many pieces that was. Yeah,
top of my head, I can't quite remember, but it's well in the thousands, and it's got lots of different books to show you how to build it. And if you think that was probably built by a team of about, I don't know how many people are here now, probably about 100, 150 people. It's you can just walk up to that, find out where the last person finished off, spend half an hour doing it on your lunch break or in between calls, or if you just wanted to have 5 minutes to yourself and think of something else for for a few minutes, and that's what that was there for, to help give you a little break, or if there were like a few people that you wanted to go and do that with, it just takes us away from our normal day-to-day work, and it works really well. I don't know what the next one will be. Obviously, we've not been in the office for quite a while now, to be honest, but I'm looking forward to seeing what the next one is. And I think I think they released a huge Batmobile not long ago, so I think
very cool.
I might try and put that one forward.
Very cool. Yeah, it just strikes me as someone's really thought about it. I mean, it's easy when you've got large budgets just to put in things like ping pong tables or those kinds of activities. But someone had obviously really thought about the collaborative nature and the team building aspect of what they were putting in when they put those giant complex Lego things together. And I really like that. And it's interesting because I hope you won't mind me saying, you've been, in the time we spent together, you've always been really complimentary as well, particularly, well, about the whole company, but particularly about your boss, about Jude, and supporting you. And it just feels like you've got the culture very, very right there. And through the training that we do, that, I mean, so for those people that don't know, the global best practice has 4 pillars to it. So you've got process, which of course is important, but most very mature companies get that right anyway. The people aspect is where even very good major incident functions really struggle. And that has, we talk about culture, we talk about personal brand, we talk about leadership and various models, and also psychometric profiling, just to build more and more collaboration. So what I really liked is, knowing what I knew about you guys as a company, you already had that built into the DNA, and you actually lived and breathed it. So when we came to that, we were talking about it with the team. It was a very easy thing to position with them. None of that was foreign. It made a lot of sense, which is one of the challenges you find, particularly in really large major incident functions. I think they think what they do is just good enough, and they forget a lot of the people aspects. But yes, it's obviously process, people, tools, then continual service improvement, the 4 pillars. But it was really interesting to see how good your culture was there, and how me as a guest, when we first started engaging, got to see that and could feel it throughout. And then when I met the team and spent time with them, fed back to you, just a really great bunch of people. So that culture really does feed right back into the types of people you guys are able to acquire in the function, which then makes it even more self-fulfilling, which I just found really interesting. I mean, I find the psychology of this and the structure of it really good, but I just thought it was very telling getting to meet the people and things you said. They obviously get culture very right.
Yeah, definitely. It's really refreshing for me to work here. Jude's been absolutely amazing with us. We're a team of about now much bigger now. Actually, we're a team of about 7 or 8 subject matter experts. So we've got change manager, we've got configuration manager, we've got myself, service transition managers, service design managers. So we're all subject matter experts, and Jude has us all working together really, really well. We're all empowered to do what we need to do to get the job done. And it's very much a case of we can have these ideas, and if we feel it's the right thing to do, as long as it's well thought out, and there is genuine evidence that it will work, there's very little there stopping us from giving it a go. If it doesn't work, then we'll learn from that, and we'll do it better next time. But there's that culture here where we're really empowered to essentially get the job done. We're not tied to our desk 8 hours a day. We're not clock watch. We've all got families. We all need to take time away, and I think as long as the work is getting done, there's no pressure in terms of how I do that, when I do that, and it just allows me to be a lot more relaxed, a lot more motivated to want to get the job done. And yeah, it's just a brilliant team to work in, a brilliant company to work for, because obviously Jude has to be allowed to have that culture almost, and it goes way it goes beyond Jude as well. So I think having Jude there at the top to be able to do that for us is just working wonders for us here. So yeah, there's a lot of companies out there that I've worked for previously that claim to be family orientated and flexible working, but this is probably the first company that I've worked for that actually lives up to those values.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can feel the positioning in terms of perhaps someone at the top of HR with all good intentions has worked with an outside firm, and the values are positioned well, and you go on the website and it looks right, and then you enter and it just doesn't ring true. And I think there's a lot of that. I mean, there's companies are struggling with the world we live in today. It's obviously suddenly an always on, which seems to have happened very quickly, an always on, and everything is being noticed and watched. So it's very, very difficult to suddenly not be true to what you say, or it's very easy for someone to find out if that is true. But that was my experience as well. You would see things in my working career, and you'd work for certain companies who profess to be one thing, and you'd go in, and it really wasn't. And interesting enough, I mean, I'm someone who I've always loved business from a young age, and so I've always worked really hard anyway, and just enjoyed it because it's a passion. But even me, who's pretty effective at what I do as well, there's been certain companies I've worked for, and noticing the difference in my own ability to get stuff done when I'm in an environment that actually hampers that and hampers my creativity and tries to be too controlling with me, is I'm a completely different person from if you put me in an environment very similar to what you're talking about. I'm probably 10 times more effective. I'm more creative. I think the interesting thing as well that companies are starting to come around to now is that failure. There's lots of nonsense is a bit unfair, but there's lots of things that people say because they find inspiration about failure. I mean, the reality is failure is pretty brutal when it happens, particularly in business. However, it absolutely is required. The thing that companies get right is that they understand how to mitigate the downside, meaning like you can afford to fail at things as long as you understand that when a failure might occur or things don't quite go your way, how you've protected, whether it's the business, yourself, and what that ultimately means. You look at a company like Amazon, who actually have a huge range of products and services that they've put out that most people have no idea about because a lot of them never properly saw the light of day. But the ones that do, it's the reason they're so innovative and do such good work is because they're willing to fail at a few things because they know that's how you innovate and how you stay ahead of the curve. So it's really exciting to hear you talk about that, particularly from an operational point of view. You've got management that kind of allows you guys to take obviously well considered but risks. But it was absolutely evident in how quickly you moved with your major incident function. So I could see you had very little red tape, and obviously you were able to implement things and process changes very quickly without too much of a problem, which was interesting because that's not always the case, particularly with a company like yours that has obviously a lot of what you're doing is fresh infrastructure, so you don't have the pain of old legacy systems, and what comes with that is usually a very high volume of major incidents. But you have such high requirements of efficient major incident management. Like your customers just need that to work. There will be problems because every company has them, as much as people like to pretend they don't. But so yeah, it was really interesting for me seeing how much autonomy you and the team had and how quickly you were able to move. But really good, really interesting. What would you say was the most challenging part of going through that process of trying to build out the function and the people aspect of it and getting the team on board? What did you personally, as the person leading that implementation, have found the most challenging or the trickiest?
For me, I think personally was the industry that we work in is not one that I've worked in before. So I thought I knew a lot of different acronyms and a lot of the technology involved. I thought in 15 years in the industry, I thought I had a pretty good handle on things. But when I came here and people started talking to me around lots of different acronyms or different terminologies that I just had no idea. So trying to get my head around that, and trying to figure out what means what and what does what and all the differences between all the different products we have, from Ethernet, broadband, dark fiber, FTTH, all those different things was quite difficult for me to do that. But I was very fortunate, again, to work with some really smart and really talented people who wouldn't think twice, about if you ask them, what does that mean or what does this do? That they're the first people to, walk over to a whiteboard and draw it all out for you, and make it really plain and simple. And they really, you really are encouraged to sort of ask for silly questions. There's no question that you can't ask that no one's going to laugh at you or anything like that. It's all encouraged. So having those people around me has helped me out a lot. And a few of those stakeholders were involved in this, and there were a few areas where you might have a normal major incident process in your, for example, your normal Windows Server environment that might not work in this environment, because of the type of customers that we might have, or the actual technology that we're using. So I think just actually getting my head around that side of the things was probably one of the biggest challenges for me. I'll probably say, but in terms of getting access to that knowledge was quite easy, because there's lots of people who know their stuff here, so that's always very handy.
So appreciate you're still in the process of building out and scaling up. As you mentioned, it's going to grow a lot over the next couple of years. But what sort of size is your major incident team? What are your anticipated volumes? Or volumes, I appreciate, might be a bit early to tell, but what's the setup?
So at the minute, when in terms of major incident managers, we're dual rolling at the minute. So we've got a few service managers and some technical service managers who have all been trained up, thanks to yourself, and as me, and they've been a part of this journey. So I've included those throughout key parts of the journey, making sure that they were aware of what the process is, how it works, what technology we're using, and that they've also got a lot of experience here in terms of running major incidents in the past. So it was important for me to get their feedback in terms of what might work and what might not work. So there's about 6 of us at the minute who will be running major incidents. I'm currently recruiting for a dedicated major incident manager.
That's a good segue for anyone watching who likes the sound of the culture at Cityfibre to hit up Daniel on LinkedIn, particularly if you're very good and very experienced.
Yeah, so we've actually had a lot of applicants for that role, which has been really promising. I think some of that is sign of the times at the minute, but I think a lot of that really is. I think Cityfibre really does have now, quite a wide level of exposure. I think the draw of Cityfibre is now quite strong. So lots of people are aware of what we're trying to do and what we're going to achieve. So lots of people want to be a part of that. But yeah, so we're going to recruit a dedicated major incident manager, and I see that role as being a very important piece of this puzzle, purely because I want that person to come in and almost take the process off me and then really run with it. Okay, so I'm going to put the foundations in place, and then I want this person to bring in their ideas, their enthusiasm, their motivation, and really build this process out. And I'm hoping to be able to build up a major incident team over the next few years, and it will become its own major incident function. If you look at lots of our competitors and even some of our largest customers that we have, they've all got their own dedicated major incident functions, and that's where we need to be. So there's a clear path there where we're trying to work towards to enable us to have that major incident function in place, and that's what this process is, really starting to be the foundations of. So I think this major incident manager role that I'm recruiting for at the minute is a really important piece to that. And I think it's a really good opportunity for someone to come in and put their name to something, and I will encourage them to bring their ideas to life and really start thinking about new things that people may might not be doing yet, or if they've had ideas that they've just not been able to express or bring to life. We've got our own dedicated development team here, so the only limits really are their ideas almost. So it's a great opportunity for someone.
Yeah, it's nice, particularly in your industry. I think operational major incident managers deal with oftentimes such large volumes that they do get less of a chance on the whole to actually contribute to shaping the function as well. They're so busy doing all the time. So yeah, and with the culture, I can see the absolute draw. I'm not surprised you've had lots of applicants, but it's interesting because you've actually got a very interesting, almost 3-tier structure of how you've got particularly out of hours, which I thought was really interesting. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, of course I can. So I've set up a 3-tier structure. So we have a duty manager structure. So our technical service center, we're 24/7. So if they have any issues out of hours, whether it's escalations, complaints, or if they're just stuck with something, then they can ring those whoever the main duty manager is. So there's 6 of those, and so it's 1 in 6 each week for those guys. Then after that, we have the major incident leaders. So if the duty manager feels that they have a major incident on their hands, then they can escalate directly to the major incident leaders, but only those guys can. And that helps limit the number of have we got a major incident or not sort of thing. So it should make that process, to a major incident a lot quicker and a lot more efficient. If the major incident leader on call decides that it is a major incident, then they will take ownership of that and start the major incident process up. And then if they need to escalate to someone, there's a 3rd tier of senior escalations, which is filled up of mainly sort of director level people who have the authority to make decisions based on business continuity or marketing or press, or whether it's more resource or certain cost level. So the idea being it is there are 6 people on each rota, and the same 3 people will be on each shift. So it helps build up like almost like a mini team. And the idea there is that it will remove any unfamiliarity of who you're going to be calling and what to expect when you call that person. So you can start building those relationships up. There's going to be none of the I don't know who I'm going to ring. I don't know who I'm going to get at the end of the phone sort of thing. So removing that piece of unfamiliarity out of that, it just makes again the major incident leader's job that little bit easier. And again, it's all about small improvements that can overall have quite a large impact.
Yeah, I thought I really liked that. I really liked that you had, before it hits your major incident team, almost an extra level of filter to make sure that you're engaging for the right things so that you don't burn the guys out. I thought that was a very smart move, and also liked how well you had considered the escalation point for those people performing the major incident role, that you had actually really thought of people who have cost center control or budgetary access, and are familiar and comfortable with making those decisions. And there wasn't much in between, so they have direct access to those people. I thought it was a really smart move, and I know we talked about it, but that was actually something you guys initiated. That was Cityfibre thing. It wasn't something we drove you towards necessarily. When we did training, I thought it was very, very smart.
Yeah, this is something that, again, I sat there thinking about all the issues that I've had over the years when I've been dealing with major incidents, and a lot of this stuff, comes from things that have happened in the past to me that that I wouldn't like to happen again to other people, and it's just about learning from things that have gone wrong in the past, really. So I'm in a position where I can put those ideas forward and have the freedom to do that. And there's very little stopping me from doing that because the ideas make sense. And it's not groundbreaking stuff. It's just stuff that is quite simple. It's easy to implement, and I think it's clear to see what the advantages would be of having that in place.
Yeah, I mean, you say that. I would suggest that actually it is groundbreaking because the industry's got quite stale. So particularly prior to us trying to help drive forward the standards in the industry, I suggest that a lot of it people were just doing, and because it was a reasonable standard, that's what we stuck with. There wasn't that much innovation. There wasn't much challenging around the way things were done. So even something that perhaps seems like a small adjustment there really isn't. If you're talking about downtime, particularly of, let's say, phone networks, for example, and some of your largest clients, which obviously, and they have their own downtime, so we all know this happens. You're talking like minutes. There's brand reputational damage to their consumers, which, depending if you're a publicly listed company, could hit your share price. You're talking huge amounts of money. So actually having direct access to somebody who understands the marketing PR aspects, who has access and the ability to make decisions with large amounts of money, I would say actually isn't that common, not directly. So I would say that is actually very different from the norm. Particularly in companies like yours and the size you're going to get to over the next couple of years, I'd say that's even less common. So I actually, I wouldn't play that down. I think that's a really smart thing you guys are doing, and you will save huge amounts of money and downtime as a result of that. And I think there's often a reluctance because we hold, particularly director level people, we almost provide gatekeepers around them and their time, etc. And there's particularly operationally, which is a real mistake when obviously you're talking about major incidents and the sorts of money that can be lost. But okay, so brilliant. Thank you ever so much for the insight. So can you talk about some of the tools and software that you're using?
Yeah, so we use Servicenow as our main ITSM tool. And again, Servicenow, certainly from my experience, is one of the only tool sets I've used that has actually got dedicated functionality to, for major incidents. It's not something that I've seen elsewhere, and it's something that I'd like to see, some of the other tool sets really spend some time on, because what they've put in place in Servicenow, which I think which is what they call the major incident workbench, it's almost like a little add-on to the incident management process, where you can actually propose a major incident, accept it, reject it, and you're no longer just relying on having a P1 as a major incident and not knowing the difference between a P1 and a major incident if there is one. So I think along with that, you have a dedicated workbench, which whilst you're in the incident that you have made into a major incident, is a one-click button, which then changes your screen so that you can see basically everything that you need to see all in one screen. You can see your communication tasks, which tell me which communication needs to go out next and how long I have to do it. So we have a 15-minute timer from when the incident is turned it into a major incident to send out our first lot of communications to say.
Glad to hear it. Definitely in line with best practice. 15 minutes from
And then once that one's completed, it will then start off the next one, which is the regular update, whether it's every hour or whatever you've agreed, basically.
Yeah.
And that will keep ticking until you want to send out the third comms, which is normally your resolution comms. And again, as well as having that on the screen, you can see the on-call rotors. So it will tell you which on-call teams you have access to and who's currently on call and how to contact them. You can see all of the incident notes, the business impact. It's all there readily available, and it's just not something that I've seen before. So it was a no-brainer for me to really try and utilize that.
Yeah, I mean, as an industry, obviously major incident management's existed in various forms for a long time. But yeah, for some reason, particularly ITSM tool providers who had seen the natural fit, never really enabled or empowered functions properly. And yeah, there's still not that much of it. Obviously, and obviously we've talked lots about this, but there's a major incident software provider ecosystem now. There's not a lot of companies in it, but there are some new ones appearing, which is very interesting. And again, hopefully it means we get better and better tools available to us that kind of do the heavy lifting. But so Servicenow, this was actually a new module that they implemented, wasn't it? The major incident workbench.
Yeah, it's something that came on board with the New York version. So it was just a module that we needed to install, which gave you the extra functionality. So it's all there ready to use, basically. Depending on what package you subscribe to, but I think if you have the normal ITSM package, and I think it's part of that anyway. But yeah, it was a no-brainer for me to really want to utilize that. Because again, it takes away having to think about how long have I got left, before I have to send the next comms out, or what is the next comms going to be. Again, it's all there. It's in my face. It tells me how long I have left. I just then click a button. It brings up a template. It pulls all the information off the major incident, and then I can just add in my next update. Click send. It sends it. It stores it in the incident. But also, it allows me to then track, how well we're doing during our major incident. So it's a really good piece of functionality that hopefully will help us improve our major incident performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting, particularly your guys using that when we do some war scenarios and actually run some demo major incidents through it. It's going to be really interesting to see your thoughts afterwards. But it's been interesting hearing how taken you are with it and how impressed you've been with the Servicenow module. Really interesting. So do you use any other tools for major incident management, any other communication tools? Is there anything else that you're using?
Yeah, we're using Microsoft Teams, and we use Teams for communication, and we use SharePoint for our document storage. And what's really interesting with Microsoft Teams there is you can almost use Microsoft Teams as your one-stop place for all communications internally and externally, and it's really open for some really interesting automation. So I was fortunate enough to speak to a senior Microsoft Teams developer from Microsoft based in America, and he was kind enough to spare me an hour or so of his time to talk me through this thing that he built, which was all around major incidents. and how he and his whole team at Microsoft used it purely to run major incidents using channels. And what he'd done is, from within their internal ITSM tool, would be when a major incident was raised, it would raise this channel in Microsoft Teams where everybody would gather. Everybody would communicate within there. So all of these resolver groups would be in there. It would post a link back into their ITSM tool, so everybody knew where to go to get to the chat level. You could start bridges straight away from there. With one click, you could invite external people in, and it just worked really, really well. And for a major incident manager to have all that in one place, again, trying to keep things simple and effortless for us, it's another no-brainer for me to really try and key into that. So I've had a play with Servicenow and how that works. And again, the automation between Servicenow and Microsoft Teams is quite mature now. So I've been able to raise a major incident in Servicenow, and it's automatically raised the channel in Microsoft Teams, and it's all there. All the information's there. So there's a bit of work to be done. It will probably become a bit more mature in the hopefully phase 2 of the actual process, which again this new major incident manager will be driving. So I think there's going to be some really interesting pieces of automation that we can bring out of that, and then if you bring in Microsoft SharePoint into that as well, what I've created in SharePoint is a one page which has all the documentation, all the process documents. It's got all the templates to use in terms of bridge templates or communication templates. It's got all of the out of hours rotors. It has information around all of our fiber exchanges. It has all of our customer contact sheets in terms of who to call when it's a major incident. And again, you can access all of that directly through Teams, so you don't have to leave Teams to get access to that information. So those three tools link in really well with each other.
Just a seamless experience by the sounds of it. Interesting. I actually find it incredible that Microsoft Teams and people like ServiceNow weren't getting more involved with the MIM Expo that we're running, because when you look at what a lot of them are doing, there's huge value back into the major incident community, and companies are desperate for innovation and efficiency in this space, which is really strange that they don't seem to be going out to the community in a big way. And ServiceNow obviously run their own events and do lots of things around it, but it struck me as odd that they would go to the trouble of building such a good major incident module, but then not, or at least I hadn't seen, not a lot of publicity around it. And it didn't seem to pushed a lot, which I thought was interesting. Maybe they have even greater things coming in the pipeline. They're waiting till till they do a big reveal. But again, I find it really interesting that you haven't seen, say, companies like Slack or Microsoft Teams, etc., actively pursuing companies in this space, because there is a real requirement. A lot of people are running on old and outdated tools, which aren't necessarily efficient. Some even built in house. Some, although saying that, there's also been some incredible tools that have been built in house by people, specifically for major incident management. But really interesting. Thank you ever so much for a really comprehensive run through of those. Very interesting. Very interesting. So it's interesting because you've, as you said, with your people, you have a really interesting mixture. If you have some who have essentially run as technical leads, you've had some who have been service managers. So you've actually got a really good range of perspectives baked into your major incident team and that wider three-tier team that you've put together. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see when they're all live and operating. I think you're going to have a very good and effective team. So in terms of in terms of staffing, obviously you're talking about people coming through, and we've talked a lot about the culture of Cityfibre. How are you thinking about the retention of those good people in the major incident function? Because you've been around as long as I have. You know that it's a challenging role. There's lots of pressure that comes with it, and it's great. But what you find is those that really get the bug and really enjoy doing it and tend to perform really, really well, retention can be a problem. Have you thought about any key strategies, or are you just going to tap into that culture that Cityfibre has already built? Have you thought about this?
Not a huge amount at the minute because of the major incident team still being quite small at the minute, and the idea is that the more dedicated major incident managers that we bring on board, then the less ones that we have to have that are that are dual rolling almost. So,
Yeah.
But in terms of keeping those people, I think a lot of that will come down to the really good culture that we have on board, but also I think there's going to be so much opportunity for new ideas to be used and new roles coming through that even if they don't stay within the major incident function, I think a lot of them may stay within the Cityfibre business and may move on to different roles, which for me, as a manager of any team really, what I want for my team and for my team members is to move forward, learn more, and really progress their career. So I think as long as we can keep growing them internally, and if they move on internally, then that's absolutely great. And one of the things that I want to try and build into this process is a really strong and robust, sort of onboarding system and an easy training system to help, bring in new talent to the major incident function. And if that feeds them off and leads them off into other areas of the Cityfibre business, then that's a win-win really. So I think we can certainly rely on the really good culture that we have here and the new Cityfibre values that we do have here. That will really keep people interested, motivated, and I think there's definitely enough to keep people challenged with lots of different, lots of new problems coming our way that we have to, think of new ideas for. And I think we are, in terms of how we build the fibre, we're thinking of new ideas all the time. So, that means we're going to have to think of new ideas on how we can support that. So I think there is plenty of things to help keep people busy and keep people challenged and interested. And if they're up for the journey and and up for that, then I definitely think we can provide that.
It's a really nice and refreshing attitude to have, because I think, and one of the things when we built on obviously the leadership section of the training, that's the approach we take, in that we don't want people just to be incredible major incident managers, although that is obviously the primary objective. We want what we teach to be so good and so powerful that as people move through their careers into other roles, they're still utilizing these models. They're still being really effective leaders, and they're referring back to the training that we've given them. So when I was looking at this, in particular, when I was heavily involved in the initial training programs, it was like, how do I make this so good that people are coming back to this in a decade, in 2 decades, and like they remember this experience and it contributes to them and their company. So it's really nice to hear you talk about this, because I think one of the dichotomies of major incident management is you've got these really good, effective major incident managers, but often that makes people, the things that go hand in hand, they're achievement oriented. So they're used to looking for progression and moving on. And the thing is, if you've got a good company that you work for, why would you want to go elsewhere? So if your company is willing to let you move wherever that may be, sideways, up, whatever it may be, then the company's still going to get the benefit of that. I think it's where companies have more of a fearful mentality of saying, well, no, these people are good, we can't lose them. And that's the exact reason they end up losing them, because they offer them no progression. They want to keep them in that role, when the reality is they're not just going to stay in there anyway. At some point, they'll either move up in the organization, or you will lose them. So I think leaders like yourself who really get that, I think get the benefit of that. And it means the overall company gets the benefit of that attitude and the benefit of keeping that skill set. And also negating the expense of constantly having to hire, because it's expensive to keep going through these processes. And you just double that if you constantly lose people out the function. You've then got to hire for the major incident role, and you've got to find perhaps someone for one of the more senior roles they may have moved into. So it always kind of blows my mind when people fail to see that. But I think there's a lot of that, particularly in larger functions, which you guys will absolutely end up being. So it's really nice to hear that. I think it's interesting that the whole, I mean, I refer to it as, I've always called the concept creating a sustainable major incident function, meaning that you're always having activities ongoing that creates feeders, so new talent to that major incident function, wherever that may be in the organisation, whether you're pulling them from ex-technical resolving group members, service managers, some companies use service desk staff, whatever it may be, or even externally, always having these activities ongoing, meaning that you have waiting in the wings a team of really talented people who have good levels of experience. And some of that comes into things like offering shadowing programs internally as well, so people get to sample the role, and there's lots that's done around that. But it's a really interesting topic. So I think it's one of the biggest failings of larger major incident functions is just that. So really, really refreshing and interesting to hear that you do not have a fearful mentality around the staff, and that you're very focused on their progression. It was nice actually. Andrew Laurie in the last podcast was also talking about this and really understood this. So it was really nice to hear. So let's talk a little bit about you, if you don't mind. So obviously we spent quite a bit of time together through this. I've personally been involved in the Cityfibre work. I thought it was a really interesting company and what you were doing. And although our trainers are very, very good, don't get me wrong, obviously I founded a lot of this, so I know the material very, very well. And so it's very useful for me to work with really interesting companies as well, as they're doing quite innovative things. But obviously you and I mean, I'd consider you a friend, so we've spent time together now, and really enjoyed your company. And we've obviously worked through the work side of things, but we have chats about all sorts of things, often cars, we talk about. But I think you're quite an inspirational character in many ways. So as well, your fitness and the things we've talked about, and you've got really, really good values. You're a very family orientated person, as I am as well. And so I hope you don't mind. I wanted to ask you some personal questions. So I'd be really interested. So what was your first ever proper job?
So I left school and I went straight into work. So I made quite an early decision to not go to college, not go to uni. I knew I wanted to get into IT. So I wanted to try and find my fastest route to do that. And it's quite an interesting story almost, because there back in, well, when I left school in 2004, I was aware of a company, or it might have been like a charity that helped. It helped sort of troubled teenagers get into work experience and stuff, whether they had like a criminal past or anything like that. Now, I don't have any of that. I'm as clean cut as they come, to be fair. So, but I knew that they could help me get into somewhere into some kind of office job, where then I could take over show what I can do, and hopefully work my way up.
I thought you were about to give us a big reveal then.
But yeah, so I managed to get into there, and I was constantly badgering them. Haven't got a placement yet. I haven't got a placement yet, and I'm pretty sure they just placed me anyway. Just to shut me up almost. And I got placed into a recruitment agency based in Telford, where I lived, on a 4-week placement, just doing very basic admin duties, mainly making the tea, to be honest. A little bit of photocopying, all that sort of stuff. And that sort of spiraled on from there. I ended up staying there for another 12 or so months doing an MBQ in business administration. I then got taken on as a normal administrator again, helping out with payroll duties. And that's where I met sort of one of my first managers, really, who I'm still very good friends with today. And I worked with her pretty much throughout my whole career where I was, which was about 7 or 8 years. She moved on into the head office in Warsaw to work in IT. And then I took her role for a number of years as the branch administrator, working through all the payroll and and ensuring everybody got paid properly. And it was at that point where they brought in this new system, which was basically a new CRM and a new payroll system. So they trialed it in Telford. So I was the first one to trial it and get it working. It was a successful trial, and at that point, obviously, they were all well aware that I wanted to work into IT, and I had a quite a keen urge to do that. So they asked me to basically go and roll the system out. So I had the payroll knowledge and how the system worked, and I was always happy to do any kind of training and that kind of stuff. So I went and rolled the system out to all the other branches around the West Midlands and a bit further afield as well. And after that was done, they then offered me the opportunity to work in the IT department to actually support the system. So that's how I eventually managed to get into that, into the IT role, and it kind of went from there, really. That's where my IT journey started, in just basic application support stuff, and that moved into more technical stuff, and again rolling out different types of systems. But this was all driven, again, working with that same manager that I had before. She's been again very helpful for me and helping me get to where I am today, and really pushing me. And I think throughout my whole career, I've been very fortunate to work with mostly really helpful managers, who have been, a really good coach and mentor to me. And without those guys, support, I would not be where I am today.
Yeah, I mean, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? I mean, I've referenced on the podcast a couple of times working for Andrew Richardson back a long time ago when I was in Fujitsu, like over 15 years ago. And yeah, I think decent, honest, good managers and leaders really propel you in directions that you perhaps hadn't even considered, particularly when you're younger. I think it's obviously useful when you're older, but I think you start to, particularly when you have a family and you think about your future a bit more and your family, I think you naturally think about those things. I think when you're a bit younger, I think having the guidance of someone and the wisdom of someone when you're perhaps not quite as focused on long-term future is pretty powerful. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for really good managers and leaders. Brilliant. Okay, so can I ask, what are your current goals, both business and personal goals
then? Personally, my own goal is just to make sure that I can, provide for my family. That's, what any father wants to do, really, and make sure we're as comfortable as possible. I think professionally, I thought I had a good idea of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. But one of the great things about working here is that there are so many different opportunities that I could potentially see coming up. And what I've experienced over the last 12 or so months, it's starting to rethink of what I actually want to do. So the next 5 or so years are now quite open for me, to be honest, in terms of what I wanted to do, and there's a potential, for me to get involved in different things that I didn't really think I wanted to until I actually started to experience those, and it's really exciting at the minute. So I thought I had a clear direction of where I wanted to go 12 months ago, but having the exposure that I've had to different things since I've been here, and having that freedom to get involved in those things has given me a different perspective of actually what I'd like to do. So there's a few things in the pipeline that I'm hopefully working towards, but in the honest answer is right now, I don't know what those 5 years look like, and I'm actually quite excited to see where that comes out.
That's quite a nice place to be, though, isn't it? There's the excitement of the adventure when there's a couple of opportunities and all of them excite you. Okay, very interesting. So what did you give up to get to where you are today? What have you given up in life?
It's a good question, and I don't honestly. I don't think I've given up anything that I'm really upset about, if that makes sense. I haven't really sacrificed too much. I think speaking to, friends and that kind of thing who went through the whole college and university experience, obviously I never did any of that, sort of stuff. And all the qualifications that I have, I've again throughout work, but I suppose in terms of what I've had to give up to get here, really is maybe missing out on that experience of going through college and university and all the different experiences that might come with that. But I wouldn't go as far as to say I'm upset about that, because I'm really happy with how things have turned out, and obviously how my personal life has turned out, with my family and with my wife and stuff. So yeah, I think it's something that I haven't experienced as such, but it's definitely, I don't think I'd probably be as happy and maybe successful as I am now if I did go through that. So yeah. I don't think I've sacrificed too much in terms of that, because I've always tried to make the most of where I am at the time, and I've been very fortunate in terms of the opportunities that I have given, that I have been given, and really tried to make the most out of them.
Okay, nice. That's a pretty good, isn't it? A few buckets filled there in terms of like family, fulfilled at work, so fulfilled socially. Yeah, nice. Okay. What is the biggest turnaround you've ever achieved in your professional career?
I think the biggest thing for me was when I first took my step into leadership. It didn't really start off that well, and part of that is because how I handled that and what I did when I first took this role on, and part of that is also because I didn't quite have the right leadership and mentorship around me to help me realise, where I was going wrong. And this was probably in my first role when I took on as a first line team leader. And I'd wanted this role for quite a while, And I think one of the mistakes I made was I sort of put myself on this sort of pedestal as a team leader. I'm in charge now. I'm above all of you guys, sort of thing. And it was totally the wrong idea. It was totally the wrong way to go about it. And I think it took me quite a while to sort of turn that around and regain the sort of trust in the actual team. I made lots of mistakes around how I wanted to implement new ideas, and I didn't get the team involved in that. It was very much, these are my ideas. This is what we're going to do. You will do it, sort of thing. And it was just totally the wrong way to go about it. And I think when the leadership changed to a manager that I worked for previously, who again is one of those managers that have really helped me over the years and was my manager for the next sort of 3 or 4 years until I left, really started to help point me in the right direction and act as that sort of leadership and coaching me, to pushing me outside my comfort zone, to make, allow me to fail in the sort of right way where I can learn from it, and put me in circumstances that I might not want to do, but knowing that if I did it, I would actually benefit from it. As a manager of people, you're always going to have difficult conversations with people, and that there's no way around that. And when you first have to start going into those, there's always that feeling, actually, I don't really want to do it, or I don't feel like I'm prepared enough for it, or I have the skills to do it. But if you have the right support around you, and you're sort of pushed out your comfort zone in the right way, knowing that if you do fail or if you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, because as long as you're learning from those mistakes, and you're not making the same mistakes again, then it makes things a lot easier. So I think being able to go from that role that didn't start off that well to then I think I took on a second line team leader role, and then that grew into more of a global leadership role where I took over I think my team leadership grew from England, Scotland, through into Italy and Poland as well. So that brought on lots of new experiences in terms of different cultures, and bringing people up to, bringing the support levels that they were, sort of giving out to where we needed them to be. I think, they were running their service desk via emails and that sort of stuff. So really trying to bring those up to where we needed to be, and helping those guys out, was a big learning curve for me. And I really did enjoy that, that role that I was in. But I think turning that around, if I hadn't have gone through those experiences, I don't think I would have learned as much as I did. So I don't regret doing what I've done and, making those mistakes. But again, I think if I'd had the right leadership around me at that time, then maybe it would have just gone a little bit different. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the things that I've had to turn around.
It's funny. That's a really common thing when people are actually honest and you talk to them about that. Almost everyone who goes into management roles for the first time has similar stories, particularly if they're being honest. I certainly did that. I did the exact same thing. I think I was a bit of an authoritarian in terms of my leadership style, partly because that's what I saw in the organisation that I was in. And so I didn't actually necessarily want to be that style, but it's the only way I had seen others who were in more senior roles behave. So I thought that's how you get ahead, and needed to behave. And I was pretty young when I first started doing management roles. So naturally, I just didn't have that much experience either. I've always got on well with people and liked people. But but I've also been quite driven. I'm a D for dominance, as you know, for the psychometric profiling. We talk about it. I think it's the most common mistake that those types of people make, is kind of forcing your desire for speed and action upon others and progress, and holding them to unfair or unrealistic expectations, and not getting their buy-in, and not being democratic in your approach to live. It's really, really common. I certainly did it. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Interesting to hear you turn it around though, because that is a challenge for people. They often move on to different roles as opposed to fix the one that they perhaps broke and rebuild that trust. So it's really interesting, really interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. I guess I have another question for you. You guys planning on entering any of the MIM awards at the expo? Because you're speaking. Sorry, I should say, good opportunity to plug you. You're speaking about the Cityfibre major instant transformation at the MIM Expo.
I am, yeah, definitely. I think that speech that I've done is, I think we may have covered a little bit with it today, but it mainly goes over sort of why I did the actual transformation, how I did it, what were some of the skills that we looked for in our team, how the process works, what technology we used. I think I really wanted to try and get across, how we transformed the process, and where we are now to where we want it to be as well. So I think it turned out quite well. So I'm looking forward to seeing the feedback from that. I think it'll be quite interesting. And for me, I think I want to thank you for the opportunity as well, because it was a real personal challenge for me to want to do that sort of thing. I think we've obviously spoken before, but I've got a bit of a speech impediment, or a stutter, whatever you want to call it. And in the earlier days of my career, it really did, sort of hold me back. And obviously, working within IT, a lot of what we do is speaking to people. So there were very early days when I first started working where I was, where I just refused point blank to go on the phones or speak to people face to face, or I've done the actual colleagues. But as I've gone forward in my actual career, it's more about just embracing what I have. There's nothing I can do about it as such. So you can either let it consume you, or you can carry on, really. So that was a real personal achievement for me to stand up in front of a camera to do that, and also do this with you today, to be honest, as well. And there's been lots of opportunities over the years, I think, where I would have definitely turned down this, a few years ago. But I think trying to embrace where I am now, and really trying to push myself out of my comfort zone, to learn new things and experience new experiences. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
No. I mean, thank you. I think the value that people will get from hearing about what you've done at Cityfibre and what you continue to do there is just huge. People all over the world. So I should be thanking you, really. The community will really appreciate it. There's a lot of insights that people will enjoy. You're obviously a very likable character as well, so I'm sure they'll enjoy listening to you talk about it. It's interesting. You've obviously got that grit, the same grit that sent you pursuing that company to find you that first IT job. Pretty good theme going on there. It's pretty useful to have that kind of persistence and grit, because life, regardless of where you start, does have a habit of giving you a pretty good kick now and again, in whatever form it is, particularly the longer you've lived. They seem to get more frequent. And it's interesting, because I always think that aligns really well to good major instant managers. So I think a lot of the best people I've ever known, and by best I mean the kindest, the most interesting, the most decent, value-led people, as well as sometimes success, whatever that means to people. Some people that means money, some people that means very different things. But those best people typically all have had, in very different forms, things that they've tried to master or overcome. And the older I get and the more experiences of those I've personally had, the more I'm convinced that those are the key to fulfillment, in that having to fight and overcome those things is ultimately what makes some of the best people. And ultimately, I think as well, why you find some of the most privileged, if you want to call it that, people who have very good starting points in life actually end up doing pretty awfully, and not all, but I'm generalizing, but the values go out the window and they're very unfulfilled, and why you see people turn to whatever it may be, substances, when actually they had a much better starting point than the majority of us. I think it's because they never faced any adversity or any grit, and I think there's a huge loss in having not done that. And it's really character forming. But so listen, thank you ever so much. So yeah, are you guys going to enter any of the MIM awards?
I don't think we will this year, just because we're so early on in our process. But hopefully this time next year, once we're a bit more mature and we know where we're at, I think having a conversation with Jude about it, when you first announced it, I think I can see it being put into my sort of into my targets for next year. So
that's a pretty difficult one to.
But yeah, no, I think it's going to be definitely something that we look into next year. Yeah, 100%.
Great.
Yeah, I think it will be good to see where we're at with our competitors and just how well we're doing, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there. I've actually got one here. I'm going to share a little preview with you and the viewers. I shouldn't really be handling these without gloves, so I'm told. These actually are worth thousands of pounds each. These aren't some cheap award ceremony that we've thrown together. These are really quite special. So this weighs an absolute ton. It's really heavy. So this, I'm getting handprints on it now. I'm going to get told off. This is actually the Major Incident Manager of the Year one. But these are absolutely beautiful. So you've actually had the first, I think there's been some photos on the sites and maybe a video, but you're the first person to see one of these in person outside of the organisation. But they're really, really quite special, actually. I'm looking forward. There's been some, and they're in, you'll like this being a car fan. The boxes that these come in are real carbon fibre. So complete carbon fibre. So these are really quite cool. And each year they'll be different as well. So these aren't going to be the ones that we have next year. You will never see those ones again. They will be slightly different from this year's versions. It's not that someone's going to be able to win the same one. It's going to be a very different version. But yeah, so pretty cool. So, okay. You guys are going to go in for next year's. We'll have to think about the design for next year's. But you'll, if you guys are to win one, you need a pretty sturdy table to put these on, or shelf in the office. Yeah, not on the Lego tables.
No, what about unless we build a Lego stand for it, maybe, or build it out of Lego. That. Why don't you make one out of Lego?
That's a great idea. I'll see if Lego. I mean, I should imagine it will cost a bit trying to get them to commission Lego for us, a giant MIM. We'll give it a go. But listen, thank you ever so much. Really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed speaking to you. As I say, this is the podcast are far more about the community and trying to get people to engage with one another more and get more access for people who, particularly, I think what you're doing is more interesting in many ways, because there will be lots of people starting a journey who are going to build a major incident function who haven't built one before. And I think that's a really interesting topic to talk about. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me.
All right. Speak to you soon.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Adam.